I met him once and only once in 1999. It was a party at Sherry Lansing's house for some Paramount movies. I think I had The Talented Mr. Ripley and he had Election, and it was during Oscar season, and she had a big party at her house for kind of the Paramount family, you know, and I saw him. I passed by him, and I knew who he was. I'd seen his picture, and I stopped him and I just said, I'm a huge fan of your work, and I really hope we can work together someday. And 16 years later, I got a call that he wanted to meet, and he came to my office, and he said, actually, we've met before. And I said, we met once in Sherry Lansing's backyard. And he said, do you remember what you said to me? I said, I really want to work with you someday. And he said, well, I've got the project. And then he told me what it was about, and then I wasn't sure if I was being punked.
A storyteller is a storyteller is a storyteller, and his gifts and his ability to do that using the medium of film just gets better and better. Like a chef who goes, yeah, no, I learned a long time ago. Don't put that in a soup.
On the first movie, he resisted an empathetic view of a protagonist, and I think he's become more and more tolerant of people's flaws and finding beauty in them.
I've seen Alexander grow as a director in so many ways, but he's the same person, but there's just more depth in his decisions.
Well, I'm more sure now to get all my entrances and exits. It makes a difference whether you have a 50mm lens or a 75 on. Of course, it makes a difference. But more important is who's the actor and what is he or she saying and how is he or she doing it. And I'm just a little more relaxed.
Matt Damon said the other day, it was very funny, he said when he was asked to do this movie, he said yes before reading the script. He said, are you kidding, Alexander Payne? I do the phone book for Alexander Payne.
What Alexander does so well, and why every actor wants to work with him, is it's those little moments of humanity that are so raw and not sanitized.
The director has so many things that he has to oversee and a million things going on in his head, and so you're there to help him. So we'll start off doing like the general scene first and just kind of getting a feel for the shape of it, and then he comes in and he tweaks like this part or that line, and you're like juggling, and he throws you another ball, and you're just trying to keep it all up in the air. And I like to do a whole scene with every little tweak that he's asked me to do and have it all going on at the same time.
Directors, when they're worth their money, are very wily people, and not to say manipulative. It's not all, laid out open on the table, put the cards on the table and we all play the same game. No, nor should it be. They have their ways, and actors usually have their opinion. That does not mean those two are congruent.
I love watching Alexander work. He's such a considerate leader, and he's so detail-oriented that it gives the actors this weird safety when everything around you has been thought of, and when he's moved on from the scene you're doing, you do feel like you generally got it because he said it was okay to move on.
I'm just a massive fan of Alexander Payne's. His work is uniformly great, so he asked if I would play, and I said, where's the sandbox?
There's never been a bad performance in an Alexander Payne movie. On the contrary, there have been some pretty exceptional performances.
I wanted to be in this movie because Alexander Payne is my favorite director, and I'd do anything for him. I had one of my most memorable film experiences with Alexander doing Paris Je T'aime. Alexander called and told me he wrote it for me, and I said, wow. And he said, will you come to Paris and do it? Oh, and there's no money. I said, sure. Why not? And then he called me back and he said, do you speak French? And I said, not a word. And he said, even better.
To work with Alexander Payne, it is something very special. I have most of his film in my DVD library, and it was like a dream come true.
It's kind of unreal, to be able to work with one of the greatest directors you have here. I love all his movies. And I love also the background movies, actually.
Working with AP on Citizen Ruth was like the greatest dream ever. You know, we were bold and wild. I mean, I can remember a couple of scenes where we would do many takes just to have the perfect Ruth tantrum.
The two directions I give most are great now, faster, and stop acting.
Alexander and Faden Papa-Michael, our DP, have worked together on many, many films. They have a really great relationship because Faden's the one person who I think can really talk frankly to Alexander, and they do have kind of a back and forth about what they're going for.
We met when I was making my thesis film at UCLA, and I didn't hire him. But then when it came time for me to do Sideways, I just offered it to him.
They're like brothers. They really get each other. They defer to each other. And watching them work together is just really fun. I'm always hanging around trying to listen to their conversations and asking questions. You know, I want to direct someday, and I just learn a lot watching them.
We bring the actors in, we do a simple blocking, just like we always have. We briefly discuss what the coverage will be. We do our shots without really shot listing or storyboarding, although they have been created for this. Obviously, where we have interacting big people, small people, you know, we are looking at the pre-vises, but much to the pain of our VFX supervisor, we do kind of just say, well, this looks better. We like to find the moments, you know, find the little nuggets of gold here and there, and you can't do that by completely planning everything out. That's just not how it works in filmmaking.
A director needs a shorthand with his or her DP about a lot of things. How something looks as you're setting up a shot. What do you have to do? Talk about everything? No, a look. Not saying something says something. Or if we need to criticize how bad an actor is doing, we can't say that out loud. That's, you know, you feel it.
What Faden brings is he has that ability to capture ordinary life, but in a way that's still beautiful and appealing, but still fulfills Alexander's desire to have it be very real looking.
What I aspire to in some of these movies is a very vividly photographed banality. I want the movies to look like the world we live in and recognize, but you don't want it boringly photographed, you want it interestingly photographed. So Faden and I have that understanding, as I need to have that understanding with the production designer, and with the makeup artist, and with the costume designer. There's an awful aesthetic that if something is going to be in a commercial film, it somehow must be more beautiful than how it occurs in real life, and that drives me crazy.
What Alexander told me was keep everything, including the new world, perfectly and beautifully banal, which is much harder than anything I ever done.
These guys know a lot more about filmmaking than I do. People like Matt Damon and Faden Papa-Michael, the cinematographer, and Rafael Sanchez, the gaffer, Ray Garcia, the key grip. I do a movie every 2 or 3 years. They do 3 or 4 a year. So when I'm on a movie set, I'm the least experienced person there. I know what this movie should look like and feel like, but as far as how things are done, they do it.
Working with Alexander has been a real treat. He's such an engaging filmmaker and such a nice guy, and he's been a really great partner in determining how we do the work. He's been very clear about the most important things to him, which are protecting the performances and making the film look real.
Every now and then I'd look at myself and say, am I the only person on this set who hasn't worked with Alexander Payne before? There are a couple of others, but he has people he just relies on who deliver every time.
Alexander and I have worked together for 20 years. Now we have such a shorthand that it's scary. We'll go and make notes, and sometimes we hold them up next to each other and they're exactly the same.
I have worked with Alexander since his very first film, Citizen Ruth. He's really awesome to work with, and he's a really good editor. And sometimes we butt heads a little bit, but for the most part, we're in sync.
We have shorthand in spades going way, way, way back. He's a partner to me like how Jim Taylor is in writing. It's really conceiving the film together. When we think of a good power cut, where you can remove a bunch of stuff and put the film together, and it's even more powerful than had you included that material, that's always a good feeling. Or if we have an idea to do something in a new way, which the screenplay did not suggest, that brings humor or emotion to the scene, that's always a thrill.
You start. Me? Okay, so we started, Tracy and I started working with Alexander on Election. and I met Tracy on About Schmidt.
He's so brilliant and so talented and inspiring in his focus on the human condition, and has such tremendous insight into the struggles of humans in trying to live and make sense of our world. People that have worked with him, you know, they'll run through walls for him because he's so loyal and so caring about their experience as filmmakers.
He's incredibly friendly and warm and wonderful with everybody. So whether it's the craft service person or the director of photography or third PA or the grip, he knows everybody's names. He respects everybody for their position and the work that they do. And everybody feels very safe, which is a wonderful feeling because many film sets, people are very nervous, and there's none of that. Alexander has a wonderful feeling on set.
I don't think we'd forgotten about you. We just got tied up with some technical stuff over there, but I'm really appreciative of your hanging in there for us. So thank you. See you in the morning. As dialogue-driven as the films I've done have been, my favorite part of directing is without dialogue. And the downsizing sequence gave me the opportunity to do a more balletic sequence.
It was conceived by Alexander as a dance, and the music ends up in this grand waltz. So there's something a little Kubrick about the way you have the image and you have the dancing music. Composition is juxtaposition. You've got a scene. What happens when you put something interesting to juxtapose against it, but somehow add a dimension?
The music is at once beautiful, dramatic, and witty.
It's completely insane and beautiful and funny. And if we get it right, it's going to be funny and heartbreaking too. And I can't imagine with the level of precision that Alexander demands of himself and everyone else that we won't get what he wants.
And actually, I think downsizing is going to be the perfect balance of what he's always been, a real smart aleck and a real sweet person and a real humanitarian.
All I can say about the casting process with Alexander Payne is it is painstaking.
We first started talking about who would be the central character 5 or 6 years ago. It was all kinds of different people, and I kept saying it's got to be somebody like Matt Damon.
He just has a quality that you can relate to and recognize, if not yourself, then people you know. He's quite a versatile actor because he can play the bourne and strapping fellows, but he can also get away with playing schnooks.
I think everybody in this movie is great, and I'm happy that everybody's playing who they are, including me. I'm happy that I'm in this movie.
Somebody told me 10 years ago, one day I'd be 5 inches tall, divorced, helping a famous Vietnamese dissident get a new foot while cruising up a fjord in Norway, discussing the end of the world with Jorgen Asbjornsen. I'd have said he was crazy.
He gets it. He knows what the movie's about, he knows what the character's about, and he gets where the humor lies, and he gets how important it is to maintain the emotional reality underneath the humor, and so I like him.
And it's no surprise that he was introduced to the majority of us in America by playing a genius in Good Will Hunting, because he's very, very intelligent, but at the same time leads with emotion. I would have made the same choice.
I feel very grateful to have found this actress, Hong Chow. It's one of those wonderful cases in movies where it's the right person at the right age with the right role. Only she could have played that part.
People always say me I'm strong. Okay, maybe Vietnam. I organized many protests. Survived 2-year prison.
He very much wanted someone who was Vietnamese. He didn't want to find a Japanese actress or a well-known Chinese actress and have them play Vietnamese. And the minute he saw her, there was just no question that she was the character.
Usually when there are characters who have a strong accent or if they come from a more disadvantaged background, they're usually not the leads and definitely not like a romantic interest. And so this was an amazing opportunity.
Hong's incredible. She's a great actress who's completely bilingual, but has American comic timing. We got so incredibly lucky.
And she does what I value most in any actor, and that is she surprises.
You're Roman, right?
The script, I think, is so funny and weird and uncomfortable and sad. I just really, really loved it, and I love Alexander's work. And to get to work with Matt was just amazing.
She's just a really dynamic actress and can strike those nuanced notes with Audrey really beautifully.
Do you understand that there exists an approximately 1 in 225,000 chance that the procedure could result in death?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Kristen Wiig is so delightful. I believe her. She can be anything. She can be glamorous. She can be plain. I always enjoy casting comic actors to play more serious parts because they bring an awareness of other colors, and they also can often play the rhythm of a scene a little bit better, a little bit more brightly.
Keep going, guys.
Yep. Okay. Action, Nisi, that last line of yours.
Taking a look at your current debt, your retirement, and your other savings, you are at $152,000 in equity. People, that is a very comfortable number.
Hello, my friend. Christoph is one of the best actors to ever live. He's just brilliant, and he can take it in any direction. And that's the fun, the unpredictability of Dushan and what he's going to do next and what he's going to say.
With the decision to play a part in a movie, I draw analogies to airplane crashes. It's never one thing. It's never, I do anything for this director, or I don't care what story as long as my part is big, or, you know, that they all have to line up nicely. And then that's where it differs from my analogy. It takes off. So in this case, it's a story. It's a lovely part. It's Alexander Payne. That's already a pretty good reason. Like I said, you're too much a nice guy and a little bit pathetic guy.
John Jackson, my casting director, came up with the idea of Jason Sudeikis, and I thought, oh, that's a good idea. I've always enjoyed Sudeikis. He's super funny, and he's also capable of doing more dramatic stuff.
First thing that, with anything, acting-wise, that drew me to it was being asked. So I probably would have said yes even if I didn't like the story or the script. But then when I read the script, I was like, oh, this is awesome. This is so subversive and clever and speaks to so many things. I was flattered to be asked. And then the character I play is a little bit of an SOB, so at the same time I was also completely insulted.
His character in this is funny, but it's just incredibly dark. And once I'm downsized, I go to his kid's 7th birthday party, and it's completely over the top. There's ponies dressed as unicorns, and it's this unbelievably materialistic affair. And he has this monologue to me about the great hookers in Leisureland. So it's funny, but it's like, oh my God. And actually, Alexander told me in an earlier draft, you find out that Dave kills himself.
But I really had to come clean about everything. I mean everything. You know, almost.
I wasn't quite sure how to play Jeff, to be honest, because it's just a small scene that I'm in, and I wasn't sure what Alexander wanted. So he just wanted me to do it normally, a little broad. I have words like nifty. What do you think of my place? Pretty nifty, huh? So anyone who says nifty, I feel like that's a bit of a tell.
Hello, Jay. What's that gonna cost me?
Now, Jeff, you hush. I was really good. Just another diamond bracelet.
Laura, having been my first experience working with a leading actor in a feature film, and we had such a good time doing Citizen Ruth. We've always said for these 20 years, gee, it would be fun to work together again, but nothing has cropped up. And she read the script as a friend and said, I want to play that part. So I said, thank you. Yes, of course. So it was only 2 days, but in a way, we felt as though no time had elapsed at all since Citizen Ruth. And it had been nice, too, a couple of years ago when I worked with her dad in Nebraska. It's nice to work with the Derns.
From the first time I read it, we both laughed about how fun it would be if I was the woman in the infomercial.
And a matching diamond necklace.
You look like a nice young couple.
Thanks. Margot's been somebody that we've wanted to get back in a film for a long time, and what a testament it is to her relationship to Alexander and him as a director that these people are willing to go, yeah, okay, I'll do it. I mean, it says a lot about them.
Yes, he called me on the phone at home. This is your old pal, Alexander Payne. Could you give me a call back? He said, it's a small part, and you're small. I said, well, I would enjoy being small.
And today we are proud to unveil what we fervently believe to be the only practical, humane, and inclusive remedy to humanity's gravest problem.
The idea of downsizing is one that would have a global impact. And so it was important to have a strong international element. Hence, the three lead parts are an American, a Vietnamese, and a Serb.
American audiences, quite frankly, sometimes are very provincial and don't really know some of these international players, but this movie is peppered with some of the best actors in the world.
We reached out to Scandinavia in general and just said, this is what we're doing. We want Norwegian people. We're willing to look at anybody. And people just started, it was word of mouth.
The character is Norwegian, so obviously I wanted to cast a Norwegian, but it was precisely a guy in Oslo who said, well, if you want the best actor in Scandinavia, that's currently Rolf Lassgård. He's Swedish, but he's never given a bad performance. And it was clear that that was the guy.
In the beginning, I shall be very honest and say you're a little bit scared. But it was like a dream come true. And then when I read the script, it was such an amazing, funny, and important script.
I'm told it was his first ever performance in English, or completely in English. I could be wrong, but that's what they told me. Total pro, complete delight.
He's Swedish, so we have to learn some Norwegian from me all the time. And it's fun. It's the best husband I could get.
When we were filming in Norway, a number of the crew were saying to us, God, we're so excited about this cast. We kept saying, isn't it exciting that we have Matt Damon? And they looked at us and said, no, it's so amazing that we have Rolf Lassgård.
Alexander knows so many things about movies, foreign films, so he was well aware of who Rolf was and knew what his potential was.
I don't think they first told me that it was Alexander Payne who was a director. They said something about Matt Damon, and I thought, okay.
You were a horse or a pony, something very strong, and I mounted you and rode you through a dangerous forest.
Okay. All my friends back home, they are totally, oh, you're going to work with Matt Damon. All the guys says that. And when I say that I work with Christoph, all the girls, oh!
Alexander has what I think is like an acting company. And there are certain actors who appear all the time.
I like working with the same actors over and over again, if I can. I would do it more often, but it all depends on the screenplay. But in some of the smaller parts, I've been able to do it. Phil Reeves, whom I first met doing Election, Patrick Gallagher from Sideways, Tim Driscoll, who goes back to Citizen Ruth and Nebraska with me. So it's always a delight to be able to work with these people.
As an editor, you feel like you know these actors. You're kind of like seeing an old friend. Of course, they don't know who you are, but you know, it's still nice to see them show up in the footage.
And so we keep building our repertoire company. It just keeps getting larger and larger. And that's what I want until we can literally cast a film sitting in a restaurant in Omaha and just sort of run through all the roles and check them off with people we know.
One of the greatest sort of assets of the movie, I think, is Stefania Cello, our designer. She is an amazing designer and a fantastic person to spend a year of your life with.
I met Stefania Cello on an interview when I was doing Nebraska. I liked her very much, but I chose someone else. And then when it came time to do Downsizing, we met again, and it felt like the right fit.
It was like, how a fantastic opportunity to do an epic. This is an epic movie.
It's one of those movies you go, ooh, this is going to be really hard, but it's going to be really fun.
From the visual standpoint, for cinematography, it's been just such a joy. I mean, it was hard compared to Nebraska, like visualizing this film. And now I know why, now that we've completed it almost, I know why, because it has so much diversity, starting off in what could be a typical Alexander Payne environment in Omaha, and then this sort of absurdly modernistic transition center, and sort of entered the Kubrickian world, which was fun to deal with, and then the tackiness of Leisureland, those mansions, and the absurdity of all that, and the over-the-top sort of crazy Euro trash party and disco lighting and
You know, still maintaining all our aesthetics and the things Alexander likes, banalité, very reality-based, and then finally moving to Norway, where the movie really opens up and our character breaks free in a way and rediscovers what's important in life and dealing with that incredible beauty of Norway. So it's a great visual journey.
It's not just an animation movie, or it's not just a visual effect movie, it's an Alexander Payne movie with the 5-inch tall people. I didn't want to do something too cartoonish. So for me, the lack of details in the architecture, in the furniture, was the key of making it more toy-like without becoming grotesque.
So much of the movie is really invented. And it's a combination of Alexander's wanting it to be real, but then she sort of took the baton and turned it into this fantastic world that somehow satisfies both impulses.
It was important to keep what is essential for his filmmaking, which is realism. It's still a story of a man, it's still a story of compassion. So that, to me, is still more important than the aesthetic aspect.
Stefania's done an unbelievable job. I mean, every set is just, you know, they've been thinking about this for a really long time. And when I woke up in the downsizing chamber, there were these marble terrazzo floors that you see that look like they have specks all over them. Well, each one of those specks was 14 times the size. So Stefania told me she had a picture of one of her standby painters who had finished the floor and he's just collapsed. I mean, because it all has to be done by hand.
The downsizing chamber, as scripted, is supposed to be a sort of large microwave. For anything in a movie, you just need some idea to start with. It doesn't really matter what idea, then you kind of taffy yank it.
I talked with Alexander and Phaedon and we decided, well, let's do a white. And white is a very scary color, especially for director or photography, because it's very difficult, and I think Phaedon did an amazing job. But the choice of that color allowed us to get into this a little bit of dreamy world. Less, it's more. I'm a big fan of less is more.
The downsizing sequence, you know, it's almost a parallel to the Omaha steak sequence. You see this process of things being transformed from one state to another, and there's a certain mechanical, sterile clinicalness to both of those things. So it's an interesting parallel, and certainly visually similar.
The visitor center was designed to look like a sales area.
The only trouble with becoming small is that you have to live in a segregated community. You don't have to, but it's safest. In a town which is surrounded by a wall to keep out critters and covered by a net to keep out hailstones, birds, and insects. These downsized cities which crop up around the world are like little segregated places. And the one we find in the movie, it's designed and conceived as a retirement community where if you have as little as $150,000, $200,000 in total equity, you could live like a multimillionaire.
I had the opportunity to work with urban planners and get their guidelines in terms of the widths of streets and how far away things need to be from one another, adjacencies. The towers are meant to hold up the net that will be seen in the movie, and you see the gondolas that are connecting the entire map of Leisureland.
Dushan's party, it's when Paul sort of wakes up that there's another world because he's gone through his divorce, he has a mediocre girlfriend, and he gets invited up to take part. And when you get there, it's women, drugs, pool party, alcohol, and Paul makes that transition that maybe there is something else.
I knew I wanted the party to have kind of a 60s party kind of feel.
The contrast to the luxurious party was the bus ride through the wall and out to the container that were built for the workers. Sort of reminds you of Dubai, where you see the giant shining castles, and on the other side of the fence are all the people that came from around the world to build those castles who never get to stay there. And the separation of rich and poor even happens when you're downsized.
The Alondra Apartments was a set that was very important to me because that was one that really came just from Jim and my imaginations. Jim Taylor, my co-writer. And it was scripted as what you see. a construction trailer converted into apartments for tiny people, that it would look something like an Embassy Suites hotel, except for impoverished people. And at considerable expense, we built the first 3 levels, and then from the 4th level on up is digital extension.
This is one of the biggest stage in North America, and we need it for scale.
The set that I'm in for my apartment, I love it because if you take a look at the movie again, go watch the movie like 10 times. If you look at the wall, it's like a big normal piece of plywood, and they've painstakingly painted the wood grain to make it look like a normal piece of plywood that the little people have just used. And I'm sitting on a champagne cork as a stool.
There are moments at times we forget that we are watching downsized characters until all of a sudden something will show up that reminds us of the actual size.
We have wedding rings from the big world now being handled by small people. We have saltines. We have a rose. So those things had really to be spot on. And David Gulick was prodigious, brilliant, and indefatigable in bringing reality to the props.
My divorce papers is a little metaphor for divorce. Small man on this giant legal paper trying to sign his name on the line, and the lawyer says, "Can you do it a bit bigger?"
So wherever large and small meet, that's where try to keep the reality of what's big without knocking you over the head.
This is Ferrero Rocher, which is a very famous Italian chocolate. Wanted to give some Italian touch to this.
What's in there?
Real chocolate, Nutella. Nutella, which is Italian. So there you go.
And what is this?
Grana Padano from the Italian Emilia-Romagna, and this is from Russia. Caviar.
It's not legal to get this anymore, is it?
But it's really good. We didn't want to draw too much attention, but just the stuff that is there and makes you do this instead of this. Nice.
Yesterday we shot a giant Tecate beer can, and all these downsized people rolling it to shake it up and then puncturing it, and there's a lot of fun stuff.
All the traveling boxes, we design first the traveling boxes on a small size, and then we have to reproduce it on the big size. So between finding big seats for the big scale boxes and then shrink them in 3D printing for the small size, and sometimes the other way around. That's why we prep for a year. And it wasn't enough time. Thank you, 3D printing.
Wendy, Chuck, and I, costume designer, we have a long collaboration. We've been working together since election.
We already have a language, having worked for so many years together.
She had a lot to do on this film because it wasn't just about what's appropriate for the characters to be wearing, but also what's the nature of fabric when you're 5 inches tall. Have they shrunken fabric? Or is it big fabric, which is just a tiny swath of that they've fashioned into a piece of clothing? So we had to have a lot of those discussions.
My imagination just went into overdrive of what is this world? What does it look like? How do we do this? So you start researching and putting pieces together and slowly chipping away at building something that makes sense.
My wardrobe is very modest and practical. She has to be able to get in and out of her pants pretty easily because she has her prosthetic, and she's just cleaning most of the time, so she dresses for work and not to impress anyone.
When I first met Matt, he's still working on the Bourne movie, and Alexander described Paul Safranek as a schlub. I was like, no, that doesn't match. So I immediately thought, oh, I think I need to pad him up. So we had the fat suit made, and he loved it.
They gave me a little paunch, little suit to put on under my clothes. Nothing too big, just a suggestion. I'm slowly losing the need for the little suit.
I would like to ask the surviving members of the original colony to stand.
We had to age, at some point, 15 years. So we have very subtle transitions so that the audience can go on the journey with these exceptional people.
So they have some glue, very, very thin glue, which make my eyelashes go down like this, and they make the wrinkles here. In the morning, it's quite difficult to blink, but after a while, I get used to it.
When I first read it, I was kind of excited because I thought, oh, I have to shave my head for a movie. That'll be kind of cool. But it was a bald cap, and one of my eyebrows was removed. And looking in the mirror, it was just so strange.
We shot it out of order, so I couldn't shave my head, which I've done before for movies, but I was happy I didn't have to shave my head and my eyebrows, which was the original plan. But what that meant was about 4 hours of prosthetic work for every day that bald cap works. They do them over my eyebrows as well, and it's a little time-consuming, but the look is good.
This is the original colony that was built by the first group to be downsized in Norway. And what you see here is just a piece of it. Visual effects will then add onto it. The look is eco-friendly mixed with traditional Norwegian architecture and colors.
I haven't seen houses like this. But with the grass on the roofs and everything, it happens.
It's more returning to simplicity, which is sort of the point of the story.
Alexander had always wanted to film in Norway, and we went on a big recce, Mark Johnson, Stefania Cella, Alexander and I, about a year before we actually filmed in Norway. And of course, it was the most northern part that Alexander arrived at and said, this is it. This is the place that we're going to film. We were really kind of in the middle of nowhere. And there weren't enough hotel rooms up there. So our Norwegian crew came up with this fantastic idea of renting a ship that is used to house people for oil rigs. And we ended up living, sleeping, shooting off of this gigantic ship. And it was fantastic because we would sort of film during the day, and then at night the ship would take us to our next location.
It was an utterly delightful way to end production. Shooting in beautiful Norway, north of the Arctic Circle, in August with almost 24 hours light and beautiful light. We really couldn't believe our luck.
The look of this film is pretty courageous because there's so many different worlds all in one film, and each of those worlds sort of have their own look, their own feel. You really see a broad patchwork of how humans exist.
There's a long history of movies where small characters are interacting with big characters, and as Alexander and I prepped the movie, we went back and looked at a lot of the work dating back to the 30s or even earlier to see how filmmakers in different eras solved these problems. And one of the things that I realized is that downsizing is a really unique story and a really unique use of these types of visual effects, and I really feel like we're reinventing the genre.
I told Jamie Price, visual effects czar extraordinaire, I want you to trick me into feeling that I'm making a movie without visual effects, so that I'm just focusing on the story and the characters.
It was interesting for me to figure out how we could use the visual effects, not just to tell the story, but also to add some humor.
Hey everybody!
Hi!
Hope we're not intruding.
No, Dave. For people in our business, this is a different kind of movie. We're going for complete realism.
When you're not moving the camera around a lot and you're really studying the performances, the shots have to be that much better because there's nothing else to distract you.
In other films, you know, crash, crash, boom, boom, the shots go by quickly and you don't have a chance to linger on them and say, oh, well, that doesn't really look right, or that doesn't, you know, they're not designed to be contemplated. But this is a movie where we needed the visual effects to be very photorealistic and to look banal, so you don't even notice that they're visual effects, and that's been tricky.
Hey, how's everybody doing today?
We had a whole variety of effects in downsizing. We had everything from huge CG environments for Leisureland to touch-up work like fixing Nyak's leg. The most challenging scenes for us in the movie were what we called the big small scenes, where we're mixing scale. We decided that a person who's 5'10" would downsize to 5 inches, and that works out to be exactly 1/14 scale. It's trick photography that's been done for a long time. You shoot one half at the normal distance, and then you shoot the other half, in our case the small people, from 14 times farther away. And when you put the two together, they look small compared to the normal sized people. You had to be very careful not to get yourself into trouble by shooting something on the big side that you couldn't recreate later on the small side, because you might run out of space.
This is one of the biggest stage in North America, and we need it for scale.
For the scene where Paul signs his divorce papers, we knew that we were going to have some high angles that were from essentially the lawyer's POV. And when we shot the original shots of the lawyer at the table, we were very careful to measure the camera heights so that when we shot Matt on the green screen stage, that we would be able to get the camera in the right place to make him be the appropriate scale.
Right now you're blocking your signature? Oh! So I'm wondering if you could come down a little bit.
Here.
Great. Okay.
Even though we're using a lot of classic techniques, we're bringing some digital technology into the mix also. We were able to use 3D printing technology to make 5-inch tall doll stand-ins. And we're also using surveying equipment to precisely measure all of the camera positions relative to those dolls and also relative to the full-size performers in the frame so that we know their eye lines and their performers on the green screen stage can match them later. One of our most challenging scenes was the bus scene where Paul and Audrey are sitting across the aisle from the downsized mom and son.
How's that?
I see you're moving to Leisureland.
To make it look realistic, we needed to find some way to impart the motion of the bus to the small people. We decided to use a program motion base, which is a device that can move the set according to pre-programmed moves. And so, combined with the original photography, you see the box moving in sync as the bus is going down the road.
Oh yeah, I'm taking a nap back here. Here's Jamie Price, our VFX supervisor. You are sitting next. I'm right here. I'm reading the book next. Oh yeah, you guys not talking anymore. You've been there for 20 years.
When Dave and Carol are introduced to the people at High School Reunion, we knew that was going to be a really interesting scene, and there were a lot of different challenges. What we started with was a box with dolls. The reason we use the dolls is because they make good lighting reference, and they also give something for the camera operator and the focus puller to really focus on. So here you see a rough version of that green screen element overlaid over the original plate of the actor carrying the box. We chose to shoot the actors in the box live action. We photographed Andy carrying the travel box. We tracked that motion and then put that motion onto a motion base that matched the motion of the box.
Dave? That's Dave Johnson, and Carol.
There were a lot of different challenges associated with the conference scene, which is the first scene in the movie where we really introduce small people. One of the biggest challenges in that scene for us was when the cart of the original colonists is wheeled out onto the stage. We knew that we were never going to be able to use a motion base big enough to move that cart full of 38 people, so we decided to solve that by moving the camera towards a stationary set, which when you're done photographing it makes it look like the cart is moving toward the camera. So that's what we call a motion control shot. One of the other features of the downsizing process is that all of your hair has to be removed. So for Matt Damon's character, Paul, we put a bald cap on him and used visual effects to touch up any of the seams of the bald cap. And we had to have his eyebrows removed, and rather than ask him to do that, we offered to paint them out, and his eyelashes as well. Another interesting effect that we had a lot of different solutions for was Nyaklan's leg. Essentially, we were painting out the actress's real leg and replacing it with a digital version when necessary, but there were a number of cases where we were able to get the effect more or less in camera.
I wear a little boot that the special effects people created for me so that I don't articulate my foot very much when I walk. I met with an amputee consultant and I got to try on what they call an eye leg that sort of simulates for able-bodied people what it would feel like to lose a limb and have to walk on a prosthetic, and it's very difficult.
One of the most complicated shots involving Nyaklan's leg was when she removes her prosthetic leg and hands it to Paul. In order to achieve that effect, we fitted Hong with a rigid appliance that wrapped around her calf. And so as she lifted her leg, we painted out her real leg and then replaced with a CG prosthetic limb, and then that's what will be handed to Matt. Another fun sequence were all of the scenes that took place in Dushan's apartment. We found a great location. However, it was a house on the ground, and we needed to figure out how to make it look like it was 20 stories up in the air. So the answer was, basically, we surrounded the house with green screen, placed tracking markers on it, and then pretty much shot in any direction we wanted, knowing that we could recreate the views later. In the case of the shot where Conrad leads Paul out on the deck and shows him his boat, we had an actual location where the boat would be shot. So we were able to mark out on the green screen where the actors should look in order to be looking in the proper spot, and we're adding the actual yacht digitally. This was our background plate, as we like to call it, and then what you see in the background here is photography of an actual fjord in Norway, and then a lot of what you see is digital work. This is a look at some work in progress on the scene where Paul and Jaak and the other characters travel from the port to the original colony. And what we wanted to showcase here was the beauty of nature, but seen from a vantage point that you could only see if you had downsized and were 5 inches high. And then we also get to see Paul seeing Jaak, seeing the beauty of nature as well. When you look at the difference between what we had in our practical shoot and what we've added, you see how much of the frame has been created digitally. When people are watching the movie, I really want them to be involved with the characters and the spirit of the movie, and not so much thinking about the visual effects as visual effects, but thinking about the predicaments that the characters in the movie find themselves in as a result of what's happened, and just enjoying, hopefully, just the visual spectacle of the story that's being told.
Steven Soderbergh once said that he will give $1 million to anybody in Hollywood who doesn't like Matt Damon. And that exactly nails who Matt Damon is. He's one of the nicest people I've ever worked with, and he's happy to be there and greets every day with enthusiasm.
Good, my friend. Feeling good, my friend.
Matt Damon was a real delight to work with. He's a total pro. He knows filmmaking inside and out. He'll do anything. He's really smart. I had been told he was great to work with, and he was.
He's such a sweetheart through and through as a human being, and such a hard worker and such a skilled craftsman, and you instantly feel like this is somebody that you can identify with.
Sorry if I ruined it.
Matt Damon is just incredibly talented and such a joy to watch work. He's a true filmmaker. He understands what the camera's doing and what the scene is about, and it's so clear that he knows what movie he's in, and he really is a shepherd of that vision.
Now we're gonna dance. So now I'm gonna make the conscious choice to dance. Yeah, just a little. I'm Paul. I live downstairs.
God, I've been dying to talk about Matt. I wish that there was something unsavory I could say about him, but no, he's perfect. He's really smart. He's really generous as like a scene partner. He's always trying to take care of everyone. He's a problem solver. He's just like a dream to have around, and I know like Alexander really appreciates him.
The nice thing about having a lead actor as a partner is that I can very openly tell him what I can't figure out. Like, hey, Matt, yeah, I'm a little stuck because I want to show both sides of the set, but really the action would take place over here. He goes, oh, well, no problem. I'll start over here and then go over here. I'll pretend I forgot something and then come back, and can just solve any problem. It's delightful.
He's just a great example of a person who can get out of his head and is so smart that any emotion is going to come from a very thoughtful place.
Well, we have all sorts of ways you can have a good time down here. No strings attached. Just put on a new credit card.
Oh, I'm good. Really?
Okay, yeah.
Paul's character in the beginning is so sort of beaten down a little bit because of my character, and what Matt is bringing to it just through his looks and his wardrobe and the way he's carrying himself. He's one of the great actors of our time, and I just think that to bring such sincerity to this crazy, funny movie is like a real talent.
I'll see you on the other side. I love you.
I love you too. It's hard to explain what he does physically. I mean, it's little things. It's like looking down and feeling unsure.
It's a big 180 for him to come from the Bourne set directly here, and he has to wear a fat suit because he's all buff and good looking for Bourne, and now he's got to play this guy who's totally the opposite.
In a movie like Jason Bourne, I have to be really vain in a way because I have to think about consciously what I look like because I don't look like that. I don't carry myself like that. This is the opposite. Vanity is the enemy of an actor.
Matt Damon is probably my favorite movie star. His smile lights up the world, and I can tell he's a good person. Now, I've never met him, so he may be just a crap. I don't know. I'm kidding, but I hear he's great. He's our Jimmy Stewart.
Watching Matt's dailies, I could tell that he was amazingly focused on his performance and committed. They worked so hard and they did so many takes on things and tried so many different things. He was always there to do another take, and he was very generous with his fellow actors too, which I always think is a very nice thing. As editors, you get to see how generous another actor is with another actor, and this guy was great.
He is very much Paul Safranek, the character he plays, who is a good man, who has a kind word for everybody, but who also somewhat is Job, you know, and has the weight of the world on his shoulders and is trying not to let you know it and yet is aware of the burden.
This is the only chance for the survival of our species. That's huge. You want to help people? These are the people that you should be helping.
Our foundation is concerned with getting clean water solutions and sanitation solutions to people in the developing world. So you've got 660 million people who don't have access to clean water, and that has a number of impacts. I mean, millions of children every year die, just completely preventable deaths. I mean, they die from having diarrhea, something that might keep our kids out of school for a day, but you know, the solution is obviously to rehydrate with some clean water and you're gonna be fine. It's something that we're really proud of. We've reached 4 million people.
He seems all-American, but in the very best way.
Try that again, and Hong, have a slightly more neutral expression by the
Trying to steal the scene, Hong. Don't do it.
Yeah.
He's like a Boy Scout, basically. He's perfect.
Downsizing imagines what might happen if, as a panacea for overpopulation and climate change, Norwegian scientists discovered how to shrink people down to 5 inches tall. The benefits are we reduce our mass and volume on Earth. Our tiny planet can barely maintain the people we have on it already, and you know, things are just gonna get worse.
When you're working on a movie like Downsizing, it really does make you think about some of the bigger issues that we're facing as a society. And as they're illuminated in the script and you work to bring them to the screen, you can't help but think about them in your own day-to-day living. So as I've been working on it, I have thought about how much trash or how much waste we produce, and what are some things that we as a society can do to make that better.
Our foundation is concerned with getting clean water solutions and sanitation solutions to people in the developing world. It's something that we're really proud of. We've reached 4 million people.
I try not to guilt anyone or try to shame them into doing anything, but meat consumption is a huge environmental factor. If everyone just ate a little less meat, because cows produce so much methane, and just the amount of water that goes into raising a cow to produce the amount of meat that they, you know, you don't have to eat a hamburger every day.
As a consumer who lives in California, the drought has become a very big deal. And the greatest tip I ever got was Alexander told me to put a bucket in my shower so that when you're heating it up and waiting for the water to get hot, you can take all that cold water and water your plants. And I do it. Thank you, Alexander.
Recycling, that is a part of all Swedish houses now. I mean, you have different. You have the plastic. It's a lot of work with it, but I think it feels good.
I am a crazy recycler, down to like if I get coffee, the plastic top, the paper, the cup, wash it out. And yeah, it's frustrating when you see when people don't make the effort to do those little things because they think they're little things.
New York, which has, every correct color bag and correct, color bin to, make it very easy for knuckleheads like myself. But the big one that I've always had, and I think it might just be having a little itch of OCD in my life, but I've done it since I was a kid, is turn off the lights when I leave a room.
We can continue pretending it's only other people's problems. Then it will be ours to a degree that we won't be able to survive. So what's the choice? You don't need a very high IQ to put the sum total together, do you?
Even when I shop, that I look at I look at the code on it to see if it can be recycled in my area, because if it can't, then I start looking for another brand that can. So unless I absolutely can't, like I'm really craving this, I'm gonna buy it anyway and figure out what to use the container for. It's become that kind of an obsession. Yeah, so it's creepy.
There's a group of people in Hollywood that have worked on sort of the greening of the film industry, which is something that I've been involved with for years and continue to be involved with, and I think is very important that we can demonstrate in the way that we shoot films and work films that we can be more sustainable.
Specifically for this movie, I designed sets in the way that I could reuse the flats in a different way. The park where we built the village would like to take the cabin and repurpose for cottages. And when I do in my life is buying less as possible. I'm trying not to buy anything and goes around with my broken jacket.
I have solar panels on my roof. I've had them for about 6 or 7 years now. I have an electric car. I try to conserve energy whenever I can.
I do too little, I think, to be honest. And I should be honest, shouldn't I? But I do my recycling with the garbage. I try to turn off the light and those stupid things we all try to do, but I don't do enough.
If you're alive, you're a big polluter. It's wonderful recycling and trying to cut down on your carbon emissions by not driving as much or driving a different kind of car, or making all those little decisions. They all do add up, but we're in a bad place in terms of climate change. Methane gas has a huge impact, and there's a lot of methane gas trapped in the tundra and up in the ice, which is melting and it's being released, and there's a lot of these systems that are self-reinforcing, and so the premise in the film is just that it's reached a tipping point that it's very clear there's really no turning back.
Downsizing, which was written 10 years ago by Jim Taylor and Alexander Payne, couldn't be more relevant today. In many ways, they wrote it last Friday because it so seizes on things that are happening to our world, physical things, historical things, just social things that have so much to do with what we're struggling through and what we're going to be struggling through.
It's such a big issue, and the world's running away really fast. And I think the most important thing is to try and live more simply. I think if we can achieve that, that's a good start, and more consciously.